Skin. This is your introduction to the body, and it's one of my favourites, skin. And obviously we've got skin all over our body, but there's more skin. It's got a different name, but there's all sorts of tricky names actually. But there's skin that covers the organs of the body. There's all sorts of skin that we don't need to know about at the moment, because what we're going to be looking at is the skin that we see. And that is the one that we see at the top here is the top layer. And you might know what that's called. It's called the epidermis. That's the one that's at the top that you can see. So I'm going to go through the slides and talk you through it with you. So we've got the structure of the skin, so what it's made up from. And if you see at the top where the hairs are coming out, that thin layer there is called the epidermis. Can you see at the side? It's labelled epidermis, then dermis, then subcutaneous layer. So the epidermis is about the thickness of a piece of paper. And underneath is the dermis that has all the bits and pieces in it. It's got the blood vessels, it's got the hair follicle, it's got the nerves. It's all going on underneath the epidermis, because the epidermis, being so thin, it hasn't got all these different like mini organs in it. But the epidermis has got an amazing amount of things going on its own anyway. So you've got these sections, and for instance, just to let you know that the dermis is actually what would be the hide of an animal that's made into like a bag or a pair of shoes. That is actually the dermis, not the epidermis. That's far too thin, but it's the dermis that they temper and that's got the strength in it. So there you've got the hair shaft, that's the hair. And then you've got the dermal papilla, which is just dermal, is really for skin, and it's like the father layer because it's underneath, nourishing. And then it's got something called the sebaceous gland. You see, it's pointing to the sebaceous gland, and that's at the side there. And that's where we get the oil that comes up onto our skin from the sebaceous gland. It's called sebum. And that mixes with the sweat on our face to give us a protection against bacteria. It's one of the, it's an automatic barrier that we have to help protect us, protects our skin. And then we've got here, can you see this one called the erector pili muscle? Well, the erector pili, sometimes it's spelt with an E and sometimes it's spelt with an A, just to confuse us. But this muscle there, can you see, it actually helps the hair to go erect, because sometimes when we are cold, our hair will stand on end and it will help to warm us up. Yeah. So every single hair in your body has its own muscle attached to it. Imagine how many hairs in your head. Every single hair has got its own muscle. When your hair stands up on end, that is the erector pili muscle. And when you get goose pimples or goosebumps, you might call them, that is the erector pili muscle making it go like that, because that helps, again, because it's got these little gaps then in between where the bumps are, that is helping to keep you warm. Yeah, imagine. So we'll have a look at the next one here, and this is talking about the functions of skin. Can you see it? It spells shapes, BD. It's just to help you remember. So we've got sensation, and that is, well, we can feel if if I pick up a pen, I know I've picked it up, I can feel it. I mean, it's not heavy, but I've got that sensation, haven't I? So I've got specialised nerves in my skin that let me know that that's not a red hot poker and how heavy it is. Because I have to know, if that was really heavy, I would have to know how to pick it up safely. So it's amazing. It's going up into our brain and giving that feedback. Another thing it does is heat regulation, and that I've already talked about, the hairs on your arms or your skin anywhere that stand up to help with heat. And another thing that you'll know, that when you get hot and you get very red, well, that is the skin bringing the blood to the surface of your face, so that when it goes back into the body, it cools you down. Because your face being hot is one thing, but your body is always trying to keep the balance. And it's this bit inside here that's so important, because if your heart gets too hot, you really are in trouble, aren't you? Imagine, or your kidneys or any of your body getting too hot. So your body sends the blood to the surface of the skin, and then when it goes to cool down, and then when it goes back into the body, it helps to cool down. Isn't that remarkable? Absorption is the next one. It absorbs, well, it absorbs because we've got nicotine patches, haven't we? And what's the patches that the ladies can have? They have them on their back or their bottom or different places when you get to a certain age. And there's HRT patches, aren't there? HRT patches. There's also patches for pain relief. There's patches now for all sorts of things, because if a chemical is small enough, it will go into the body, and once it gets into the skin, then it can get through to the bloodstream, and that will bring it back around the body. Essential oils can be absorbed into the skin. So there's various ways for essential oils that we use with aromatherapy to enter our body. We can smell, and that actually goes straight through and ends up in our bloodstream, but also through the skin. And that's why you need to know what quantities to use, because you could really do harm, because they're very strong. So we've got protection. That's the next one. Well, it protects against UV rays. And the way it does that is that your skin turns brown. So how does it turn brown? Well, there's a special tiny cell in your skin that's actually in the epidermis. Do you know the one that I mentioned that's as thick as a piece of paper? The epidermis has got 5 layers. 5 layers. And one of those layers, the base one, has got melanocytes in it. Melanocytes. And that releases melanin, which turns your skin brown to enable you to protect against UV rays. It's also a good protection. For instance, you don't cut that easily unless you're really unfortunate. Like kids are always running over, but their legs don't suddenly all open up, do they? I mean, they're really, the skin's really, really strong, and of course the graze it or cut it, but it then grows back again, doesn't it? Just amazing. Excretes. Well, it excretes waste, and it excretes sweat, and sweat's made out of salts and urea and water. Of course, most of it is water, but it will excrete rather. That's the difference. Excretes, so excrement, that's how I remember it. Excrement is waste, isn't it? So it secretes something that is good, except if you have too much of it. It secretes sebum, I mentioned that a little while ago. It's the sebum in your skin. You've got sebaceous gland, and that will release oil that mixes with the sweat and forms a barrier. It's called the acid mantle, to protect your skin against bacteria, an automatic defense. Of course, at certain times of your life, that secretion can be too much, and teenagers in particularly have often too much sebum, too much oil on the skin, and this is usually thought of as a hormone problem, and it's a really distressful time for many teenagers, obviously. Now, in your skin, you also it takes in the vitamin D. So the vitamin D is absorbed from the sun, and it mixes with calcium in your blood, and strengthens the bones. Yeah. So it's really important to get enough fresh air and sun in particular to keep your bones strong. So the layers of the epidermis, which we've already been saying is as thick as a piece of paper. We've got 5 layers, and the top layer is stratum corneum, and then we've got lucidum, granulosum, spinosum, germinativum. So germinativum is a really important layer, that bottom one. Say that these were the 5 layers. So there's, I've said on there, come, let's go see Grandad. I made that up when I was a student. Come, let's go see Grandad. So I could remember the different layers. And the it is also called the basal layer, the germinativum, just because it is. And this is where the melanocytes are formed. And also it's the layers of the skin that start off being made here in this cell, and it moves up through the ranks until it gets to the epidermis, and then it's dead skin, and that's when it needs to be taken off. So this is why ladies and gentlemen exfoliate, because that top layer is actually dead, but you wouldn't need to go far down before it's live, and you would, hurt yourself. So gentle exfoliation only. Yeah. So the epidermis has got 5 strata or layers, and the lucidum is absent on very thin skin. For instance, the skin on your eyes here hasn't got, it would be too thick. Imagine if it was as thick as the one on your hand, for instance. And it speaks there about the stratum basale or stratum germinativum is attached to the dermis. So that's right at the bottom. And it's called mitosis, is the new cell that's being made, like a little factory. So that it goes up through the ranks as it grows, it migrates up and ends up here. So it's made here, it's alive, and then it moves up to the top, and then it disappears without washing. So the dermis, which is underneath, is mostly, it's called connective tissue. It's got those little, if you go back to that second photo there, it shows you what you've got in with it. You've got the blood vessels, you've got the sebaceous gland, you've got the end of the hair follicle in there, and many sensory receptors, as it says. Well, that's the nerves. Sweat glands are in there, and this is the hide of our body. So I've already mentioned melanocytes, and they make melanin, and they're in the deepest level of the epidermis, protecting us against UV damage. Can you see the image there pointing out the melanocyte at the base of the epidermis? And you see the hair follicle going right the way under and through. Amazing, isn't it? So sweat glands, we've got more than 2.5 million, and we've got eccrine and apocrine. And eccrine are the smaller ones, and the apocrine ones, I call them like the A-team, because they're the big ones, and they're in the axillary, which is under the arm. That's what axillary means. And then in the genital area, in the top on your thighs. And they empty these sweat glands into the hair follicles, and the bigger ones can cause body odor. And this begins at puberty, and the eccrine glands are more sort of superficial. And the sweat contains water, as I said, and urea, which is where we get urine from. It's the same stuff. The sebaceous gland I've mentioned, and here's a really good close-up of the sebaceous gland. It looks like a large bunch of grapes at the side there, and it's at the side of the hair follicle, at the hair shaft we've got. That's going to come through the skin surface and out into the outdoor world. And these glands are found everywhere apart from the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet. And they secrete sebum. And they've got a lot of good qualities about them. And because they are helping to protect as well as moisturize. It's the body's natural moisturizer. So here we've got some conditions. Here we've got acne vulgaris caused by, and that is really a hormone problem. It isn't to do with being unclean at all. It's a hormone problem. Here we've got a plantar wart, which we call verruca, and that is actually a virus. So they can be difficult to get rid of. One of the things to get rid of them, one tip, is the banana skin, the inside of a banana skin, and you put it over the wart or the verruca with a piece of duct tape, and you change it regularly, and there's an enzyme in banana skins that helps to get rid of warts. I know. So this isn't very pleasant, is it? You don't have to be looking at it. The fungal infection, which is athlete's foot, and that thrives in warm and damp conditions. And when it gets as bad as the picture that you've seen, then you're really in trouble. We've got pictures here of gangrene, which is pretty horrible, and basal cell carcinoma. That is a skin cancer. A melanoma is another skin cancer. The contact dermatitis is very common, particularly in nurses. Doesn't always look as bad as that. These are extreme examples. Nurses, mechanics, imagine they keep having to wash their hands, hairdressers, and it's very nasty conditions. Some people have to give up their job because they're having a problem. Some people can be allergic to lanolin that's in gloves, and they have to buy for gloves for working in, I'm thinking. So yeah, so gangrene, when this one here is really bad, and they would need to have that taken off, and you can lose your foot or your leg if it's not seen quickly enough. People with diabetes need particularly to keep a look at their feet to make sure, and they used to get free chiropody for that reason, but I don't think they get it free anymore. But they do need to take extra special care of their feet, and any black spots need to be looked at immediately. They don't need to get as bad as that, but people have lost, as I say, a foot and a limb because it was spread up the leg. This herpes zoster is highly infectious, and we call it like a cold sore, and it's, oh, you're not born with it, and apparently it's when someone kisses a baby that it gives them the it gives them this. So you need to keep well away from it, and that's why if anyone went for a facial, they'd need to know that if you had that, then they would have to cancel the appointment. It's usually on the face. Impetigo is another horrible skin condition. This is highly contagious, and it would you can't go to school with it, for instance. It's usually school children, but you can have it as an adult, and it would go to other parts of your body if you touched your knee, for instance, after touching your face. So yeah, not good at all. And we have gout here, which looks really, really painful, which is a form of arthritis, and it's to do with the salts in the kidneys. So that needs specialist care. A ganglion is something else that somebody could get, and that is a harmless growth, and the doctor could best advise with that. We've got psoriasis here and eczema, and psoriasis is usually on the outside of a limb, and eczema is often in the inside of a limb, and they're both exacerbated by stress. Neither of them are contagious. You can't catch psoriasis and you can't catch eczema, but they're certainly very distressing conditions. And if you look at eczema, quite often looking at the diet, cutting out dairy, wheat, that can help a lot. Babies are often I've got eczema, and so it's best to try and look at the diet first of all. And there's lots of creams that are available on the market, but that's a really nasty one. Psoriasis is, we talked about the epidermis that you can remember so well with the 5 layers, and you remember that it was mitosis that started at the bottom and it comes up to the top. Well, with psoriasis, it just comes up too quickly. Instead of taking 30 days, it just comes up and comes up. And it's like a multiplication of skin cells on the top. And it's because it's called an autoimmune disease, because your body is sort of attacking itself, if you like. And there's all sorts of ways of coping with it. You can't necessarily get rid of it, but again, exacerbated by stress. So anything that brings down stress levels is to be recommended. So the skin needs to be taken care of, and it does renew every 30 days. So we can help by cleaning it well and by giving ourselves a little exfoliation, just a gentle one once a month, because if we don't, then the creams that we use can't really get near because it's got this dead skin on it. So I hope you enjoyed that quick run through on skin, and that you've learnt a little. Thanks for listening.